Hello. Um, let's see. In this element or this module, we're going to look at something that is connected to moderation. It's advisable to always have a system of moderating your assessment. At the moment, I'm going to cover this area where you are provided with moderation evidence, which is now your course outline or the syllabus, which is evidence number one, which contains the learning outcomes, which we spoke about earlier on. All right. The next thing you're going to be provided for could be a qualification, which also has the same learning outcomes. The next thing you should have is now your assessment, meaning your assessment questions designed based on how the learning outcomes are. Remember, assessments are meant to capture whether learning took place. I beg your pardon, right? The third one that you could be provided is the assessment guide, or rather the assessment marking key or memorandum, which provides the suggested solution on what the assessment has been set. Now, an element of post moderation could be also sample of you moderation papers, meaning samples of student or participants or learners work, samples to see how the papers have been marked, and you could also comment on that. So a quick one, let's see. Now we have this moderation standard which you need to follow. Every organization that does assessment, every organization that prepares students for examination, those students write the examination and there is output in terms of what they have done, should provide a system where they have a standard of moderation. This helps in uniformity, quality, and making sure you bring all the moderators within the same page, where if their opinions are provided, we have a standard way of comparing what we have provided. So these standards are crucial. The ones I'm providing for you here can be changed. Ensure that during your moderation criteria, there is something you're working with for you to comment about. A quick one, we have different types of moderation standard. What I've provided for you today or now is an element which has about 3 criteria. One is technical coverage. Now, what do I mean by technical coverage? The technical outlook, design of the paper, meaning in terms of the design, the structure, and presentation. That can be what we would refer to as technical coverage. Does the coverage look consistent? Are your fonts looking consistent? Are the design looking consistent? Now you can see what you provided with a couple of questions here, which you should use to moderate those assessment. Meaning if you're provided with the evidence, which is the course outline, right, or the syllabus or the learning outcomes, the questions and the marking guide, you should, and also samples of these papers, you can use this to really collect data to see whether the assessment is quality enough. Now you can see right from the top, the assessment includes all necessary sheets and documents. Now it's up to you now to comment. Now in most cases, you're provided with an opportunity to comment on this aspect so that you're able to see what your feedback is going to be. Now in most cases, the first aspect, if your answer is supposed to be not met, it's very important. Anytime you comment on not met, you make sure at the end of it, or you clarify that component. What do you mean by not met? All right, ensure that provide hard evidence in terms of giving feedback. Don't just say not met and that's the end of it. As a moderator, this information is very important. If you also state partially met, indicate the threshold of what you'd say is partially met. What we mean in this case could be some could be provided, others are not. And of course, if everything is provided for you, you should be able to tick for that. Now remember, this is a guideline where all the moderators should be giving feedback. At the end of it all, moderators should have a meeting where they sit together and reconcile these suggestion moderation criteria standard questions. Now the second one is cover page, has time and subject name. This is the same thing. So go to the cover page with instructions, watch on those instructions, see anything with time, subject name, clear instruction about the sections have been met, make sure you identify that as a moderator. Instructions are clear, indicate that. If not met, always comment how. Of course, all the way to correct numbers, check on the paper. Use readable fonts. Are the fonts readable? Sometimes organizations have a standard font that you want to use. Marks are clearly indicated and corrected. That is on the question. Please verify that. Reconcile those marks as well. Total marks add up correctly. Also check this part. This is very crucial so that you can always address the issue of technical aspect. All right. On the other hand, can the paper be finished within the time provided? Now this is a little bit tricky. I remember very well, some people mainly take the total number of time divided by the number of marks to see how much would be the average time per mark or per question. Another way of doing that, which is number 9, is to give sample of this assessment to any other assessor to do the paper and judge the timeline, because you don't want to find yourself where students are faced with a paper where they cannot complete within the time provided. So this is technical aspect is very important in your moderation aspect. Also look through your evidence and check whether illustration graphs are clear and ready to print. Now some papers, of course, they may not have this, but that doesn't mean that the criteria has not been met. You can always say not applicable or not needed, but where graphs are provided, are they very clear for the students? Can they follow the student assessment graphs and resources? You need to point out there so that at least the assessor can correct. Remember, as a moderator, you're standing in the gap between the students or the participants who are writing the paper and the assessor. You don't want to provide where assessment with mistakes and errors going forward. So watch out this technical aspect. On the other hand, follows syllabus format. It's very important, like we said earlier, on learning outcome. And that's where, as a participant, you need to be, as a facilitator, you need to be very proficient in terms of developing a learning outcome and being able to connect those learning outcome with appropriate training methods and resources, assessment method and resources, and the assessment design, as well as those questions. If that is not appropriately mapped up, you need to highlight that as a moderator so that the assessor, on the other hand, can be able to correct these. So this tool can also be used by the assessor so that they can make sure that the assessment meets appropriate standard. Now, this is the first part of technical coverage moderation, and these are the key aspects. So, of course, make sure you're able to tick. If you feel the second part is partially met, note that and highlight. If you feel it's clearly met, highlight that as well as a moderator. If you feel maybe layout does not fully met, you can actually highlight that. If it's correct numbering is highlighted, you can tick on that. Use readable fonts. Okay, you can say probably you're happy with that. Marks are clearly indicated. Probably you could be happy with that. Total marks add up. Probably you could be happy with that. Can be finished within given time. Probably you could be questioning that, looking at maybe the timeline. If you have gauged the paper, if you have assessed the timeline, maybe probably graphs are met, and of course follows the syllabus partially met. So these are key aspects. Now, I'm not using any particular assessment, but I'm giving you a guideline. You should have such kind of standard moderation criteria that guides on technical coverage, and this can really highlight key issues that can guide you to come up with quality assessment in terms of moderation. So we'll be looking up for the next element of moderation, which will be the next part of moderation technique. So see you shortly on the next stage of moderation. There are a couple of them, about 3 or 4, and we'll be going through them one by one to ensure that we have met all the requirement in terms of other moderation. So technical coverage, these are samples of what you should have. You can always add something extra, design one that works for you, that is appropriate for your institution to apply this standard. Thank you. See you shortly.